protests and counter-protests are continuing throughout the United States. Both the white nationalists and the anti-fascists grow more bold and mainstream each day. Let's take a look at their actions and law enforcement's response and mitigation tactics at a recent protest in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Grab your seats. It's time for Counterterrorism Roll Call. Welcome to Counterterrorism Roll Call. I'm your host, Holt Clark. The Murfreesboro, Tennessee protest was set up in the afternoon the same day as the Shelbyville White Lives Matter protest. The groups were supposed to move from one place 25 miles to the others to protest. Now, law enforcement in Murfreesboro had a very similar setup to what we saw in Shelbyville. And if you missed that, you could see that in my video by clicking the link here. There were a lot of officers around. Uniformed, there were a few plain clothes. There were officers in tactical gear, riot gear. We saw special regulations set up for the protest area. The signs regulate what can be brought in and what must remain outside. There were physical barriers, both barriers for people and also public works vehicles used to prevent vehicle rammings and attacks that way. There were helicopters and observation posts. There were even mounted patrol. Law enforcement had set up two sides to the protest area, and there were checkpoints to get in. There was one for the protesters and one for the counter-protesters. And since that morning in Shelbyville, I had spent the morning with the white nationalists, and that was more than enough time to spend with them. I went to the counter-protester side for this protest. I had a very uneasy feeling while I was there, almost like anything could happen or anything could erupt at any moment. Now, there was a mixture of protesters, and you could tell that right when you drove into Murfreesboro. There was a line of what looked like average concerned citizens that did not want this in their town. And they lined the street as you drove in from Shelbyville to Murfreesboro. There were a lot of people on the counter-protester side in the holding area before you went through the checkpoint. And you could almost see and judge their level of commitment to the cause based on, number one, their clothing, and number two, the look on their face. That is, if they weren't wearing a mask. You could see people like this, and I think they were just out for the day. They probably believed in the cause, but I think their idea of a protest was more like this. Then you had another group of people. They looked more hardcore. They looked more ready for a riot than a protest. Take a look at this guy with the body armor underneath his clothes. It's probably homemade body armor, but he seems kind of proud to show off that he's ready for a fight. And I think they dream of protests that look more like this.
Age and resolve, displays of force.
As I said, the counter-protester side was an entire spectrum, but a large group tended to be anti-law enforcement. And that is, the Antifa and the supporters of Antifa are generally view law enforcement as either being an enemy or at least an evil presence. Following that chant, there was some kind of disturbance up near the checkpoint caused by Antifa. And you can see how effectively the mounted officers move through this very packed crowd. Notice how the Antifa try and stop the police officers when they get up to the front by holding their hands out in front of the horses. And you heard lots of cries of, "Why are you picking on us?" or "Why are you following us?" The turning point of this protest really happened before the protest occurred. The League of the South leader tweeted out that the Murfreesboro protest was a legal trap for them and they weren't going to show up. The counter-protester crowds were overjoyed. Hey, we won. And they began to file out. Now notice at about 18 seconds in, this one Antifa girl goes over to the landscape to retrieve something she left behind. But they're very concerned about keeping their faces covered and no one knowing who they are.
kept you cattled out of the protest area so that you could not be heard. Your mouth.
If you want to know more about the Antifa movement, watch my video here. Now, I followed them after they left the protest, and they marched to a nearby park a couple blocks away, and all I really saw them do there was pose for pictures. And it reminded me of this photo that I've seen online. Other than how they were set up, once the protest was canceled, there was not a lot to observe about law enforcement. However, I did see one thing I thought they did excellent, and that was the police coverage outside the protest zone after the event occurred. And I'd long thought this was really a dangerous area. There are heavy restrictions and heavy police presence inside of these protest zones, but once you get a block, 2 blocks away where everybody is parked, it seems to be more of a response by 911 on any standard day, not a special event. But again, that was different on Murfreesboro, and let me explain why. There was a man with a green pointy mohawk. He was with a woman, and they brought their children to the protest to hear both sides. Now, this enraged some of the counter-protesters, that someone would even have the heresy to believe there are 2 sides.
There's no both sides. There's one right side and your fucked up ass side, stupid bitch.
Now, a large group followed this family for a couple of blocks, taunting them, trying to pick a fight. The crowd built, and the crowd started to join in and take in that mob mentality. Law enforcement very quickly arrived in large numbers in a parking lot, and they were able to break this up. I'm completely convinced that if not for the extended patrol by law enforcement, there would have been violence outside the protest area. If it wasn't this particular case, it would have been another one. But when the protesters and counter-protesters saw the heavy presence of law enforcement, they realized it wasn't going to be tolerated. And it really was smart policing by Murfreesboro and the agencies supporting them. Now, these protests will probably die down during the winter, but they'll pick back up in the spring. I'm confident of that. And if your jurisdiction is likely to see one of these protests, you might want to contact me at holtclark.com. We have a training for jurisdictions, everything from tactics and strategies for the law enforcement officer on the street during the protest, all the way up through the chief elected official. You can contact me at holtclark.com for more information about this. Now, until next week, please be alert and be safe. Thanks for watching. Please visit our sponsor, patriotthreads.org, and stay tuned for a special offer from them. Would you do me a favor and hit the like button? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. If you want to know more about me, go to my website, follow me on Twitter, or just run me on NCIC. I'll see you next week on Counterterrorism Roll Call. Until then, be alert, be safe. PatriotThreads.org is apparel with a purpose. Patriot Threads offers state-themed, game day to outdoor lifestyle apparel, like the new line of Southern Trout shirts, and introducing the new Back the Blue shirts. All are 100% printed in the USA. Are you looking for a new, exciting, profitable fundraiser? PatriotThreads.org would love to help. Go to their website for details. Use promo code ROLLCALL at checkout and you could save 20% on the sale. And Patriot Threads will donate 20% of the profits to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. PatriotThreads.org is a proud sponsor of the men and women of law enforcement.